When it comes to Vue application development, the whole application UI should be split by multiple pieces, and those pieces are self-contained components, which will be able to reuse multiple times. Currently in our application there is only one root component called app, which contains everything: header, navigation bar, as well as main application area. And in this lesson we're going to try to split this UI by multiple pieces. For example, we can create separate components for header and navigation. To do this, let's switch back to the editor. Here we'll find markup of the header, cut it from here. And on this place we're gonna use custom component which we'll soon create, called the header. And the reason why I used prefix the in the component name. This is one of the recommendations when it comes to naming Vue components. And in case some component will be used on the page only once, it is recommended to start the name with the prefix the. And this way, by just looking at the component name, we will know that components with prefix the are used only once on the page. And now let's go ahead and create Vue component. We'll create new file called the header with extension .vue. This is a special extension for Vue single file components. In here we're gonna create new template tag, where we will paste markup for the header. In Vue single file components, template tags are used to store markup of the component. And now, since we have created new file for custom component, it's time to import this component from that component where it will be used. So we'll go back to the app component. Here we'll add another import statement and import the header component. This component is located within components folder, and we can see that one of the imports in here is no longer used. That is import of this icon component. Check circle icon. And we have to move this import into our custom component, the header. So go back to the header file. Here we add script tag. We'll also use setup keyword in here. This will be a sign to Vue that we're gonna use Composition API. And right here we're gonna paste import of that icon component. And since we no longer need this import within app component, we'll remove it from here. Also, let's tweak a little bit the path to the logo. Since the header component is contained within components folder, we should firstly leave this folder to access assets folder in this path. And now, just by looking at the Vue developer tools, we see our custom component, the header. And on the right side, we can also see that this component uses custom icon component. Check circle icon. And now we're gonna do the same steps to move markup of navigation within its own component. Let's go back to the app component. Here we're gonna find markup of navigation, cut it from here, and use component with the name the nav. Just like before, I used prefix the in the name of this component, since we're gonna have only one navigation on the page. So let's create the file for this component with the same name, the nav. Here we'll create template tag and paste the component markup. Then, as always, to use custom component, we have to firstly import this component. Let's add an import for the nav component right here. And let's take this whole script tag and move it to the nav component. In here, we're gonna remove unnecessary imports. And after that, some of the imports can also be removed from app component. For example, import of these 3 icon components, because we no longer directly reference these components from within app component. So let's remove this import, as well as the definition of this object navItems that describes our navigation structure, because this object was also moved inside of the nav component. And there we go. Right now we see 2 custom components, the header and the nav, that are contained within root component app. We can even go one step further and split header by components. For example, we can create separate components to represent logo, and also one more component to represent progress label on the right. To do this, we'll open up the header component, look for logo markup, cut it from here. Logo component is only going to be used once, so the component name will also contain prefix the. Let's go ahead and create a separate file, name it just like component the logo, create template tag and paste component markup. And now let's go back to the header component, and here we add an import for the logo component. In Vue DevTools, we can see that the logo component was added under the header component. So now let's do the same with progress label markup. We're going to create separate component, cut the whole markup of the progress label, use component name the header progress, and follow exact same steps to create new component, starting by creating a new file with template tag and component markup. And now all what's left to do is to import this component from within the header component. Let's add an import right below the logo component. An actually statement that imports check circle icon component should be moved to where it is used, inside of the header component. Let's cut and paste this import inside of the header progress component and finally check everything in a browser. And here is the final result. At the top level we have our root component up, which contains the rest of our components. Up component's markup is split by two components, the header and the nav. And the header component was also split by two components, the logo and the header progress. And this is how we approach development of almost every Vue application, by splitting the whole application UI by several different pieces, called components.